Hey, Jory, you gotta make me a co-host so I can share screen too.
Yep. Done. Okay. So I'm just going to do a little intro and then I'll pass it off to Ryan here. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We've got a much larger turnout this time than the first time around, and hopefully that continues to grow. So starting off with our land acknowledgement, Trent Herpetology respectfully acknowledges that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. I also want to make a comment about safe spaces and that we want Trent Herping to be a safe space for all students. So please be respectful of others and refrain from using any derogatory language, and if necessary, ask for pronouns. So if you're new to the whole Herpetology from Home thing, it's a continuous online speaker series hosted in the afternoon. Well,
do your own stuff, sweetie. I'm on here.
Oh. Hosted in the afternoon, usually on the first Wednesday of every month, but I think we're going to be switching it to Tuesdays from here on out. So these talks are designed to be fairly casual and will be focused on researchers and professionals kind of in the next stages of their career after finishing undergrad or college programs. So we'll be covering a variety of topics and species, followed by a conversation period at the end where you can bring all your comments and questions and anecdotes and whatnot. So I'm super excited to have you all here, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So Ryan, we're happy to have you here today, and I'll let you take it from here if you're ready to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan. I'm gonna share the presentation.
I'm just gonna also ask again for anyone new coming into the chat here, please mute your mic if it doesn't already mute upon entry.
Okay. And everyone can see the screen. Yeah, it's. Oh.
Yep, you're good.
There we go. It said not responding for a second, and that was technology, man. Okay. Oh. So as Jordan said, we're doing the Herpetology from Home series, and I'm very grateful and happy to be the second presenter. Megan Ward did a presentation last month on a species that also inhabits the same place as the one I'm talking about today. She was on the smallmouth salamander, and it was a great presentation. So if you didn't get the chance to see that, you should go back and watch hers as well. But yeah, today I'm going to be talking about the blue racer and my research on Pelee Island. So who am I? My name is Ryan Wolfe. I'm a master's student at the University of Toronto, working in the Rawlinson Lab in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology. I actually started in my undergrad at McMaster University in environmental sciences, and I hopped from a few different programs during my time there. But I did graduate with my environmental sciences Bachelor of Science, and I did some co-op stuff while I was in there that I'm going to be talking to you a bit about as well. So as I was asked to give some interest, obviously herps are first and foremost. I've loved them since I was a little kid, as I'm sure some of you or many of you did as well. I'm also interested in photography, anything to do with conservation, hiking, camping, and in the winter I ski a lot, so I can pass the time until the herps come back. So moving on to the blue racer in my project and some stories about them. For those of you who don't know what the blue racer is, it's a subspecies of snake of the North American racer, which spans across a large amount of North America. You've got into Saskatchewan as well. Oh, my internet connection just said unstable. Can you guys hear me okay? Jordan?
You did cut out for a second there, but I think we're good now. So just go ahead.
Okay.
I'll let you know if it
cuts me out again, let me know.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so as I was saying, it's a subspecies of the North American racer. It ranges across a huge amount of North America exists in the northeastern states and in Ontario. It can grow up to about 2 meters in length, making it Ontario's second largest snake, next only to the black rat snake or gray rat snake. In terms of what they look like in their appearance, the adults and the babies look very, very different. The adults have like a gray to brownish kind of dorsal back, and then on their sides they have a bright blue to a dull bluish gray kind of stripe, which is why they're called the blue racer. And then their bellies are a cream or white coloration, and those bellies are actually speckled when they're babies, and the top is completely patterned super heavily with kind of a reddish brown tint that you can see on the bottom picture on this slide. And then another thing that they're well known to have as adults is the black mask and the brown nose that you can kind of see in the top picture there. But so this species has a pretty unique, not unique so much as primary habitat type that they occupy, and that's open canopy savannas and grasslands. And on Peely Island, where they exist in Ontario, it's also alvars. And they spend almost 80% of their time in these areas. So they're super specific to that habitat type. They eat a wide variety of prey items. They are considered generalists, feeding on rodents, frogs, small mammals, and they'll even eat other snakes. And as babies, they eat insects, crickets, and caterpillars and stuff like that. And notably, the species in Ontario and Canada was listed as endangered all the way back in 1991. And that's one of the reasons, it's one of the reasons why we're working on them so much today, is because of their endangered classification. So just like almost all of our herps in Ontario, they face a series of different threats. The first one that they have is a very small population. We don't know exactly how many are left, but from previous studies, we know it's very small. And the threats that come with the small population, of course, are you could have one big mass mortality event or something like that, like overwintering mortality, which could wipe out a significant portion of the population. Then you get into other things you might have heard of, like bottlenecking, where the genetic diversity doesn't support a continuation of the population, and eventually they'll die out. So that's a big threat for the blue racer. A second one is their range restrictions and the fact that they're isolated now on one island. They don't have anywhere to expand to or move to if, for example, climate change over a long period of time.
Hey, Ryan.
They can no longer exist where they are. They can't move north or bad internet.
Yeah, you're cutting out a bit.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna do one thing then.
Sure, no problem.
Oops.
Yeah, it was good for most of that time. Just at the very end there, it started cutting out a bit.
I'm just internet source for a second. I cut out. Okay, am I back?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, this one, oh, my bad. This one should be better because my Wi-Fi at home is pretty spotty, so I'm using my cell phone now.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Awesome, thanks.
So if I cut out for the range restriction / isolated threat, they're stuck on one island on Peely Island in Ontario, and so they don't have any room for expansion, and their population can't grow beyond what that island can hold. So that's a smaller threat to them. Another threat that's a major one is habitat loss, and that's one of the reasons for the range restrictions currently. Obviously, with agricultural fields and urban areas and stuff like that coming in after European settled Ontario, a lot of habitat was lost, which forced them only onto Peely Island where they are now. And they even face habitat loss where they remain despite having large amounts of land being protected. Another major threat to them is the loss of hibernacula, which they rely on every winter to persist and keep on growing population and remain stable. These areas are a key critical habitat type for all herp species in Ontario, minus, I guess, the mud puppy. But yeah, so these areas, especially the hibernacula that exist on not protected lands, are a threat that would be catastrophic to the blue racer if those were lost. And then the last one that I'm going to mention is road mortality. Every year, a lot of the snakes, especially the babies that are born on Peely Island, die due to road mortality, and that's something that, of course, is unsustainable. So in Canada, the blue racer only ever existed in extreme southwestern Ontario, around this green circle here, and it's assumed that they occupied a few different areas between these kind of red squares you can see from the atlas picture. But since we started recording their occupation, where they occupied areas in about early 1900s, these are the only information we have on them. And so the red squares are where they used to exist, and the green squares are where they now only exist. So in about 1983, they were extirpated from the mainland and are only found on Peely Island. So, of course, having seen a loss of this species in Ontario, research started occurring on the blue racer. And in the 1970s, observational surveys began on Peely Island, which documented racers using almost the entire island, and more so than they do today. But in 1993 to 1995, Ben Porchuk, who was the first person to do an in-depth study on blue racer in Ontario, he did his master's and didn't find them on the western side of the island. And so this range map that you see here is kind of where they're restricted to since then. And then in 2000, 2002, Rob Wilson and his team, including Jeff Hathaway, who was on this call right now, they did a population estimate back then over the 3-year period, and told us how many were left then. But since then, there hasn't been anything like scientifically done with them besides Jeff taking his team from Scales and a few extra people down to Peely Island every May 2-4 weekend to look for the snakes and record how many they see and where. And it's a great opportunity, a great way to see the blue racer and see Peely Island, and do a lot of other herp stuff in Ontario. So if you ever get the chance, you should do that. So then we get to my research, which started in 2019 and consists of 2 different projects. The first one is a population estimate. Having not known what their population has done in the last 2 decades and 20 years, we're trying to address that threat of the small population by finding out how many individuals we have left and letting the government know how urgent it is to act on conservation efforts for the species. The second project is habitat management. A few different organizations, Ontario Nature, and then Scales Nature Park, it does some habitat management on the island for the blue racer. They're doing prescribed burn and mechanical removal, trying to address the threat of habitat loss. So I am piggybacking on that to compare the efficacy of each of the management practices being used, so we can provide best management practices for blue racer on the island to the conservation landowners. So as I mentioned, the first project is population estimate. And in 1993 to 95, Ben Porchuk did his master's, and he also produced a population estimate during this time, indicating that there were about 250 adults remaining, but that number was declining pretty rapidly and at an alarming rate. So that's why Rob Wilson did another population estimate in 2000, 2002, and that produced an estimate of 140 adults remaining. It's probably a little bit of a low ball because they weren't able to access all of the prime sites for the species, but it's still an indication of a decline. And it was recommended at that point that this population estimate be repeated every 5 years since then. But as I mentioned previously, there hasn't been anything done besides the Jeff Hathaway surveys with scales. And they did note that there was a decrease in the number of blue racers that they saw every year that they went down. So over this year and the next 2 years, I am doing pretty intensive daily surveys across Pelee Island in the spring and fall to repeat this population estimate. I'm partnered with Scales Nature Park and a few other organizations to do so. And we're basically going out capturing the snakes that we see, measuring them, weighing them, and pit tagging them, which is just a way of identifying if we had caught them before. There's a little scanner and it reads the tag number. And then we can use those numbers of initial captures and recaptures to determine how many snakes are left on Pelee Island and in all of Ontario and Canada, since it's the only place they live. Then the second project is the habitat management one. Because they are a species that relies on that open canopy grassland savanna alvar, and a lot of the areas on Pelee are no longer that and don't support them. If you look at the top two pictures on this slide, you can see what some of the areas look like now, where these used to be open grasslands and savannas. They are completely taken over by dogwood and have become these shrub thickets. And the racers presumably are not able to use this habitat effectively. So Ontario Nature did a prescribed burn, and Scales Nature Park and myself and some volunteers did a mechanical removal to open up some of these areas and try and restore the habitat for the blue racer. And then the science part of it from my end for my master's is comparing the efficacy of those practices. And I'm doing that with 3 different metrics. The first one is assessing thermal quality. As we all know, reptiles are ectotherms, meaning they are cold-blooded and they need the sun to thermoregulate and perform their life functions. And so obviously with having these shrub thickets having come in, the sun isn't able to get to the ground and the snakes aren't able to thermoregulate the same. So we're assuming or hypothesizing that if you open up these areas, it's going to increase the thermal quality of those habitats for the snakes again, making it suitable. So I have these copper models with thermometers in them that record the temperature, the environmental temperatures that the snakes would experience. And that will tell us how that thermal quality has changed after the prescribed burn and mechanical removal has been done. The next one is habitat suitability. And that's just measuring the actual vegetation parameters themselves, like the canopy cover and that kind of thing. And the last one is relative abundance, where we actually survey for snakes using some cover boards, and we determine if their presence is increased after the habitat restoration occurs, or if it kind of remains the same, and which one was more effective for the snakes. So I'm still doing some of my work, and I can't produce the results in a sound enough way yet to let you know what they are. But the anticipated results and goals is basically that we'll produce the best management practices to conservation landowners on Pelee Island for the blue racer, such as Nature Conservancy of Canada, Ontario Nature, Essex Regional Conservation Authority, Ontario Parks, and any private landowners who would be interested. But then also the population estimate, of course. We'll see how many are left and how urgently we need to do some of this work. And then one other thing I can mention is that the blue racer was potentially predicted to be potentially extirpated by 2025, but we have seen quite a few individuals over the last 2 years, and it's pretty safe to say that they will not be extirpated by 2025, which is really, really good news. Okay, so that's kind of the more boring science stuff. And so now I'm going to be talking about some field stories that accompany the photos I'm going to be sharing. So first and foremost, I'm actually going to do something besides the blue racer, and it's another species that we encounter quite often on our surveys, both cover boards and during the population estimate surveys, and it's the eastern fox snake. They are an incredible, incredible species. They are the 3rd largest snake in Ontario. and they are always a treat to come across in the field. And one time I remember actually surveying for them, and I actually stepped on one in the field because they're so good at camouflaging right into the grass. The snake was fine, and I just barely touched it, and then I picked it up. But yeah, they're incredible camouflagers, and they are always a nice treat to see when you're doing surveys. So this snake, her name is Lucy, and this is one that Jordan and I found this past summer. And I just remember seeing this grass movement and this darting snake. I couldn't tell what it was or how big the snake was or anything. It was just this grass moving in the wind. And so I bolted after this movement, and I stopped because it stopped. And I looked down between my legs, and there was just this little bit of blue racer poking out. So I scooped down, grabbed it, pulled it up, and I was like, this is the ugliest blue racer I've ever seen in my entire life. Because it looked awful. It looked like it was sick or something. We didn't know what was wrong with it. And later that day, it actually shed in my hands and was this picture here, which is clearly not ugly. It's one of the most beautiful racers we got this year. It was just incredible, but it was a really funny story. I'll move on to the next one here. One of the other species that we see is the eastern garter snake, of course. And Pelee Island is particularly special because they have a large population of melanistic eastern garter snakes. And this individual was particularly special, not only in Jordan's reaction when he flipped the cover board and found it underneath it, but because it's xanthic, which means it doesn't have the yellow pigment, and it produces an exceptionally large amount of blue. So as you can see by the picture, it's just an astounding looking snake with the blue against the black melanistic scales. So that was a real treat from 2020 as well. Then you have this guy. Well, you got three guys and then a snake. And the snake is what we're focusing on here. His name is Hulk. And the only thing I want to say about him is that he fought off at least one cat, for sure. He had bite marks all along his side. He had like scratch marks where he was clawed at, and he was able to fight off a pretty severe attack from a cat, which is pretty amazing in terms of snakes, because a lot of these guys suffer an untimely death due to feral cats.
It's crazy to think that even on a place as isolated as Pelee Island, there's still a bunch of feral cats running around. Really unfortunate.
There's a lot of feral cats running around. People like to have them around their barns to keep the mice away, but unfortunately it ends up keeping the snakes away as well. It's not so good. This snake is pretty special because we found this one along with an adult in the middle of a snowstorm on Pelee Island this April. And so you don't expect to see snakes out super early, especially these large-bodied snakes like the blue racer. But literally, I think it was 9:30 in the morning, a snowstorm came in, and you couldn't even see. It was a blizzard, like completely white. And then it stopped, and like half hour later, we found this snake and another adult, which was incredible. And so this is kind of a picture I'm going to give you a second to look at. There is a blue racer in this photo, and obviously you won't really be able to guess where it is, but I'll give you a minute to try and see if you can spot it. Just to give you an idea of how hard some of the blue racer surveys are. And we actually only can find this snake because we released it and it went to this location. Otherwise, there's no way that I would have been able to spot that during my field surveys. So if you haven't been able to see it yet, I'll zoom in a little bit, and now you should be able to see it. If you can't, it's right in the middle here, up in the tree. Its whole body goes along this. And if you go back, it's up here. So it was like 20, 30 feet off the ground easily in the vines, and it had no problem climbing up there. It just shot right up. And as you can imagine, trying to see that snake while you're looking for them on the ground is very unlikely. So surveys for these guys is pretty difficult, and you don't really know where they're going to pop up. So another fox snake photo here, and this speaks to the resilience of snakes. This fox snake got hit by a lawnmower. It was fully alive, but had this huge gash out of its side. Another field tech who was helping me, Taylor Kennedy, he cleaned it out with alcohol wipes and tried to disinfect as much as he could, let the snake go. And then a few weeks later, we re-caught it, and it was completely healed and was doing fine, had put on weight even, I think it was. So it's incredible what they can do. And the snake on the right, these right two pictures, its name is Hook. And we found it this spring. Mac Marzolini on this call found it, and it had this busted eye cap. And then this fall, it completely healed and was able to use its eye again, which was pretty incredible. We thought for sure it was going to lose its eye or something. Then you have the incredible growth rates of the blue racer. So this is all the same individual from the same season. We found the picture on the left was in June of 2019. Then this picture in the middle was about 2.5 weeks later. And the picture on the end was in September, so a few months later. And it had quadrupled in weight and I think almost tripled in length. So it's truly incredible how fast these guys change and grow. And at first, actually, we thought this middle snake had eaten the young snake because they eat other snakes. And so we were concerned that we were only getting a beep from the tag reader giving that identification code because it had eaten it, but it wasn't the case. And then 2020, obviously, I have to mention the fact that we did our fieldwork amidst the start of the pandemic. And so this is the back of my car packed full with food, brush saws, and equipment. And then I put another turtle on top to hold all of our gear, like our bags and stuff. And we packed the cars full and lived on Peely Island for a month without having to go to the grocery store or leaving or anything. And on the first day down there, this is the crew that we brought down, and we got a blue racer right off the bat, which was pretty incredible. And then there's some funny things that happen, of course, when you're in the field and they make the field season so incredibly awesome. You have a picture of these three guys photographing a toad, and there's really no other way you can photograph toads. And then you got a picture of Kenny Rulin in the top. He got a little chilly and decided that he needed to bask like the snakes to warm up, because some of the days you're surveying, like I said, there's a snowstorm. You're out there in like 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. It's pretty crazy. And then you have Taylor Kennedy. If Taylor's listening to this, I'm sorry for sharing this picture, man. But this is him eating a lovely piece of fox squirrel that he was able to, I guess, process and cook up one day after it fell out of a tree and did not survive. And the fox squirrels, which is the only squirrel that's on Peely Island, is actually an introduced species for game, and they're not so adept to climbing in trees, so they fall out quite often, and sometimes they don't make it. So Taylor was able to pick that one up off the ground and cook it, and I have to say it was really, really delicious. So good job to Taylor cooking that. And then some other cool things, probably my favorite stories from this year. The first picture here is me putting a plumber's camera down a hibernacula, and you can actually see an eastern fox snake stuck between the limestone bedrock as it's coming up to the surface to come out of hibernation for the year. So that was pretty cool to see. The second one, Kurt, he was around for this when we were doing a survey on one of the properties, and he screamed racer, started jumping through a bush, and then was just like, I lost it. So I ran over. We tried to find find the blue racer, couldn't find it. I ended up stumbling upon another one sitting in the grass. So I picked that one up. We were wondering, is this the same one? It couldn't be. So I walked back into the forest a ways away in the direction that the one blue racer, the first one, headed. I didn't see anything. And I turned around, and right in this tree, kind of, I guess it kind of looks like a butt, so where the crack is, was this little piece of snake, just visible. And so I was able to poke around in there and safely pull the snake out. But it was incredible how quickly these snakes can just disappear, just like that. They're just gone out of sight, and you don't know where they went. And oftentimes they just find a place to hide, and they hunker down and sit still. So that was a cool one, and thank you, Kurt, for being a part of that. And then the last picture here on the right was one of the craziest catches I've ever had for blue racers. And I didn't even see either of these snakes. I took a step, I saw something shoot off in one direction, so my reflexes kicked in. I was on the ground on my stomach, had a hand reached out in the middle of a fragrant sumac bush, and I had just the tail of a big blue racer in my fingertips, and I was holding it. And all of a sudden, another snake shot out, crossed over my arm and over the other blue racer. So I had to reach my other hand and slap that one down, and I pinched just the tail of that. And Nicole, who was an intern at Scales, I don't know if she's still there, but if you are, this is your story. It's pretty cool. So I had to call her over and say, grab the snake, I'm going to lose it. Like, it was right on the tip of its tail. And so she came over and grabbed that snake too, and we were able to get two racers at the same time. But yeah, so if they're not up in the trees, sometimes you don't even see them on the ground, and that's how difficult these snakes are to catch. And then I think, yeah, so the last story, this is me, the last survey of the year, sitting on the ground waiting for the processing gear to come back, because I was finishing up surveys, and in the last hour of field surveys for the entire year, we caught the largest snake that we have on the project so far. Her name is Roxy, and she's about 5.5 feet long. And it was just truly incredible. But what was even crazier is how quickly we had to get the field equipment down from the other site to process the snake and hop on the ferry, because we have to be there at a certain time. And we were within the last like half hour of that time. So it was pretty exciting and made for a fantastic wrap up of the field season. So those are some stories. I've got plenty more. If you ever meet me or just chat with me on Facebook or something, feel free to ask. But so one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of if you're looking at doing your master's, and this is how I got here. So of course I did tons of volunteering. These are just 4 randomly picked organizations that I volunteered with before I even entered university, and then while I was in university. And that's a huge first step. So get out, volunteer as much as you can. There's a lot of organizations that would be super happy to have volunteers, and it's an opportunity for you to learn some pretty incredible techniques and meet some people. So definitely volunteer as much as you can. Then my professional experience, I worked for a few different places that kind of got me to this point in my life. And first, I worked for Hamilton Conservation Authority. Then I worked for the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories as a research assistant, a species at risk research assistant. And then I worked for Ontario Nature. And most recently, I worked for Scales Nature Park as I was doing some of my master's work. And then academics, of course, I was at McMaster University, and now I'm at University of Toronto. But important here that I want to highlight is these 3. So I volunteered at Ontario Nature, got to know everyone, and then I worked at Ontario Nature as a co-op while at McMaster University. And then I worked with them after I graduated for a year, and now they're a financial partner on my master's research at the University of Toronto. So that's how important it is to kind of access all of your options, all of your facets that you can get to where you want to go. Meeting people and increasing your network is extremely important. So I have a few tips and advices to wrap up. I don't have much because Megan did a great job and has some links and stuff that you can access from her talk last month. So I highly recommend looking at that. But if you're looking at getting into academics, again, you want to volunteer in a lab at your university. You want to do an undergraduate thesis or project to get you used to doing research. And then one thing that I don't see a lot of that I recommend is taking writing workshops, because it's a big thing that all professors look for and definitely appreciate, is someone who can not only do the research, but be able to write it up afterwards. And that's the same thing for professional too. You need to be able to write. So for looking into getting a job and starting your professional career, it's the same sort of thing. You want to volunteer as much as possible, a wide variety of organizations where you can learn as many new things as possible, and really don't limit yourself to one organization. If you can get out to multiple, that's great. You're expanding your network and increasing your skills and things that you've done for different types of experiences. And then also you want to go to conferences and workshops wherever you can. That again is just for meeting new people and expanding your network. So if you're planning on doing graduate school, of course you have your grades, funding, which is the money part, and writing, which is 3 things you really need to be able to get in there. You have to usually submit a writing piece, your grades, and then have funding. So those are pretty important. So just keep that in mind as you advance through your university career. And then I just have 3 different ways you can get into a master's project. The pretty typical standard one is to apply externally to a project that has been offered. So you find an online application or link and you can apply to that. Another option is to find a lab that you're really interested in, talk to the supervisor, and then you can apply to that lab and create a project with them. But you're not limited to this kind of thing. For example, my research, I actually designed the project first, then found a supervisor and applied for my own money, and then was able to enter the university under Niall Rollins's supervision. So you have a lot of options, but it's always good to look at that before you get to the stage where you need to start applying. And then just to give you kind of an idea, I left this up of how many people are involved with my work. It's really incredible, and I don't think even everyone is listed here, but there's a lot of volunteers associated, and then all of these organizations. So I want to say thank you, of course, to all of them, and then just to give you guys a visual of how many people are involved. Okay, so yeah, I can open up the floor to questions. I think I went a little long because of the internet connection, but please send your questions my way, either on chat, or Jordan, you're going to facilitate the questions?
You can read chat, right?
Yeah, I can read chat.
Okay. Then yeah, feel free to just take questions in chat. If you want me to facilitate, I can, but you can also just answer them yourself if you want.
Yeah, all good. I can do them in chat, or if we get to the end of the chat and someone wants to come on and unmute themselves, please feel free to do that as well. So let me see. Steve's talking about Pinery. Yes, that's something I would like to do. Stephanie Winton, was there a report for the project, Steve? Oh, I'm reading questions that shouldn't be asked to me.
Okay, you just scroll down to the bottom.
Yeah, I will do that. So one thing I just want to mention is that people up top are talking about reintroduction to the mainland, and that's like Jeff said, it's still in the mandate, the government recovery strategy, and that's something that will likely have to be looked into in the future. And I think depending on the estimate that we produce from the population estimate surveys, that might be one way to advance that up if there's not many left. But anyways, I'll move on from that from now. Okay, so Jory, you asked who my supervisor is. It's Niall Rollinson, U of T. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's really great, but he focuses more on turtles, and he has people doing salamander stuff too. Do you have any idea when reintroduction may begin to take place? No, I'm not sure. The government is generally pretty slow on that type of thing, and I don't think it's even being considered logistically right now. I would love to see it being considered, but I don't think it's even on the table at the moment. Okay, Hope says, for the thermal quality of your thesis, portion of your thesis, do you have any temperature data pre-management practices? Yeah, okay, great question. Wait, I'm gonna read the rest and I'll finish that. It would be really interesting to see how that has changed. Also, is the goal temperature logs determine if those managed areas are now suitable based on copper models? Yeah, so to answer your first question, Hope, I do have pre-management data. So that's one of the things you have to consider when you're creating a research project is often you need control and treatment sites. And one way that I did this is I had control sites and I also had treatment sites, but then I also did a pre-management and a post-management data collection. And so that I can relate it back to those specific sites themselves as well. And so I can say that the temperatures overall increased after both management strategies from 2019 to 2020. And it looks like the mechanical removal produced a more suitable environment in terms of thermal quality for the blue racers, because it changed it raised the temperatures more so than the prescribed burn did. But so when I am able to fully analyze that and compile that into my thesis, I'll be publishing it as well. And then whatever method is most suitable will be the recommended one to the conservation organizations on Peely to keep on doing for the blue racer. Tom said, would you agree that Hook's recovery was spectacular? It was a spectacle to see, that's for sure. But yeah, it was incredible. No problem, Hope. Yeah, I'm always surprised at the resilience of the snakes. I thought for sure that Hook was going to lose his eye or maybe pass away because they're visual predators. So they rely on their eyesight for any time they're hunting. And with one eye, the second time we caught him, he actually couldn't even see where I was. And I'm surprised he survived. But yeah, he had a full recovery. Yeah, I didn't know it could heal like that either, to be honest with you. I'm not sure what was going on with it originally, but it looked like it was infected and had like a really big, like it was really swollen, and his eye is still, like the left eye is still bigger than his right eye, but it looks completely normal now. Riley asked, most interesting Garter locality you've seen. It has to be Peely Island for sure. Just because you have such a high prevalence of that melanistic gene pool, you get some funny things going on with it too. So you have some like partially melanistic snakes where you can still see some pattern. You also have those crazy bright red or orange ones that you get in other places in Ontario. And then that axanthic melanistic was probably the coolest one I think that I've ever seen. Jory says, I missed the beginning, but did you observe any incidents of SFD? We did in the fox snakes. We haven't seen any in the blue racers. We swabbed, I think only one that looked like it had SFD potentially. It was just like one nodule, and we swabbed and it didn't come back with anything. So that was good. And I haven't seen anything that looks like SFD on any other ones since. Yeah, so hopefully it doesn't, I don't know if they have a higher resiliency against it, but it's definitely in the fox snake, so it's on Peely Island. So I'm not sure if it maybe doesn't show in them as much or something either. Steve, there are a few parasites that infect the eye naturally. Okay, yeah, it could have been that, and then maybe he was able to rid himself of the parasite. Tom says, will this type of field research be deemed essential if COVID restrictions persist into the field season? I'm not sure with the current restrictions and what that would limit. But last year, science was still listed as an essential service, and I was able to go down there. It was pretty, they weren't really specific on the restrictions last year, and So I'm not sure if they're going to be more strict on it this year or not, but really what's going to be the major limiting factor is the ferry that gets us across to the island. If it's only essential workers, they have the right to decide who gets to go on and who not. Okay, good, great. So Jeff said it's still considered essential even after today's updates from Doug Ford. So it looks like it should be going forward if things don't change, and hopefully things get better and we can get back down there and keep going with the surveys.
All right, if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to shoot, either type in the chat or unmute your mic. Otherwise, we can wrap this up in the next couple minutes.
Oh, Steve put up a, oh yeah, it's Dry Mobius, look at that. He put up a
Yeah, I
picture
saw
of a
that.
racer on his. He's
So great. Okay. So if there isn't any more questions, we're just going to wrap this up. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. And thank you so much, Ryan, for the amazing presentation. You rock. That was so good. I love the field stories aspect of it. Definitely makes me miss field work in the summer, though.
Yeah, well, that's why you have to do the field stories, because
no,
we're in the
you're
middle
so
of
right.
winter. Everyone needs it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, just like reinforces how amazing time spent on Peely was, and how amazing that island is in general.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, I think the next Herpetology from Home should be on first Tuesday of February, if I can get somebody by then. If not, it'll be in the second week. But I hope to see a bunch of you back here. I'm going to try to get a turtle researcher next time to switch it up a little bit. We've had a salamander, we've had a snake, so we're going for turtles next time. So it's going to be really good, and hopefully we'll see you there. Additionally, we still need to book speakers for the last couple months of the term. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing the series into summer at all, but definitely until April. And so if you or someone you know is a master's or researcher or young professional in the field that you think you would have some cool stories and like good insights into kind of how to start your career in herpetology, or what the career space is like, then feel free to reach out to me on my personal accounts or the Trent Herpetology accounts, and we can work something out. Yeah, if you or somebody else you know you think would be a good fit for that, let me know. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and I think that's going to be it for us, unless there's any more questions. It looks to be it. Cool. All right, thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.
I hope everybody has a great week. Take care, everyone.